Hey y'all, it's Sunday. Today I am going to go over some of the news from this week, and that's what I'm going to be doing on Sundays. So today I have 4 stories to cover, 2 from the States and 2 from the UK. I'm going to start with the States. First off, the Affordable Care Act. Currently, the House has passed a bill to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, called the American Health Care Act. And I'll link below to some analysis that actually shows the number of people who would die each year from that. I'm going to go find it. Basically, a lot of people are going to lose their health care if this happens. I think the number is 22 million people will lose health care under this bill. It was supposed to go through the Senate this week. It did not, because the Senate could not get enough people to agree to the votes. So it hasn't gone through yet. Continue calling your senators and letting them know how you feel about this, because they need to hear what people think. There's been protests and stuff like that, but I'll pass on that because there's so much else to talk about today on the other stories. The second thing I wanted to cover in the U.S. is the Muslim ban, or something called also the travel ban. At the beginning of the year, beginning of this administration, there was what was called the Muslim ban, which banned travel from people from a number of Muslim majority countries, and that was blocked in the courts pretty much immediately, and it's been going through the courts. It has now gotten to the point of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has decided to hear arguments on it, and they're going to do that in the fall. And in the meantime, the Supreme Court has decided to allow the ban to be implemented temporarily. And the way it's been implemented is that people from the banned countries, if they do not have any family ties or other reasonable ties to people in the United States, they cannot come. Which means that this disproportionately impacts refugees especially. So, yeah, basically the ban is implemented. It's here. It's happening, and we'll find out what happens with the Supreme Court in the fall, because it's pretty much up to the courts right now, unless we could somehow convince the administration to not want to do it. But I feel like that's a very difficult challenge. Anyway, moving on to the UK. In the UK this week, the UK now officially has a government. It is a Tory minority government, as was expected after the results, and they have the support of the DUP after agreeing to at least $1 billion. I've seen a couple different numbers cited. At least $1 billion of funding to Northern Ireland after campaigning on saying that there is no money. They have given $1 billion to Northern Ireland, and then voted again to continue the pay freeze on all public services, which but pay freeze is basically a pay cut, because inflation continues to go up, but your pay does not go up to match that. So it's like a pay cut, especially when it's been happening for a long time. That's why we've had stories of nurses who are going to food banks because they can't afford food, and they're the people saving lives. And they've done this in the context of the Grenfell fire, and the fire service are people who also are suffering from the pay freeze. And speaking of Grenfell fire, that's the other story I want to cover today. There continues to be a whole ton of anger and just utter distrust with the government within the local community in Grenfell. And there's a lot of talk within the UK as a whole. This has become something that's being compared to the Hillsborough disaster, which I don't know enough about, but it was a massive government failure and disaster situation, that a big deal. And this is more and more, there's becoming a sense that this disaster is going to be a defining moment for this country, a defining moment in history in a lot of ways. One of the things that's come out is that across the country, people are checking existing buildings for their fire safety, and a lot of places are failing. Like, tons. Like, they checked, at one point, they had checked 120 buildings, and all 120 had failed, and I think now the number is 149 out of 149 have failed, that the government has checked, but also, like, I know my university has checked buildings, and they realized we have a high-rise building and there's no fire sprinklers, so that building has been condemned and students are no longer living in there. But it took this to make somebody go check. And in the Observer today, there was a article about that, about how the fire brigade has actually been warning about a lot of this stuff for years. There, in 2015 in London, the fire brigade gave a, let me see what it is. They gave tools to the councils in London to deal with fire safety, and it was basically a list of questions to ask for any new developments or anything like that, or refurbishment work or anything like that. And they sent it to all the councils in London. There's 33, and I'll just read you this quote from the Observer today. It says, "The Observer approached all 33 London councils to ask how they had responded to the brigade's recommendation to use the audit. The boroughs of Enfield and Kingston-upon-Thames were the only two authorities to confirm that they had applied it in full. 2 out of 33 boroughs have actually used the fire service's recommendations on how to make their buildings fire safe, which is very frightening. We may get a lot of rain, but we do still have fires. So there's a lot happening in the country in terms of, like, realizing that we've had massive government failure in ensuring people's safety. And there's all sorts of stuff still going on with housing people, and in the local council of Grenfell, where the Grenfell fire happened, in the Royal Borough of Chelsea and Kensington, the leader of the council and the deputy leader of the council have both resigned, as well as other members of the council, because they have been facing so much backlash for all of the decisions they've been making, that they were like, okay, we're not doing very well. And then the chief executive of the organization that manages the building has also stepped aside. Just to clarify, the council is in charge of that building. It's council housing, but they basically outsource the management of the building to this organization. So that organization is also having things, and there's lots of people who are calling for the government to strip the local council of all of its power and take over, because the local council has done such a horrible job of managing this massive crisis and this disaster. And the issue of the death count continues to be an issue. The number now is at least 80, according to official counts, and the government is saying that they might not have an actual number until the end of the year. So 6 months of not knowing how many people are dead. And part of the reason they may be doing this is that there have been past incidences of overestimating, and they don't want to overestimate and cause unnecessary panic, but a lot of people believe now they're dramatically underestimating, which is also causing a lot of people upset. And part of the problem, according to the government, is that the building has no official list of who lives there, so they don't even know who lives there to check. And it's all very, very, very messy and complicated, and they should have a death toll, but they don't, and people are upset about it, and they will continue to be upset about it for a long time, and I will probably be updating you more on this story next Sunday. I imagine there will be more. Who knows? Anyway, stay awesome, y'all. Bye!